Your sensors are correct. Do not adjust your heading. You've discovered the Omega Particle, streaming to the Alpha Quadrant and beyond. Here's your host, the anchorman of the Federation, the Doctor of Dilithium. This is Jonathan Wiegand.
You know me, it's OPP. Welcome, Trekkies, conversationalists and intellectuals from across the fruited plain of the Alpha Quadrant. We have a very, very special episode today, and I am sure everyone is wondering how exactly this is possible. You know, how exactly can we watch Prodigy yet? When is it actually going to be released here in the States? Because your boy had to go to France, had to go all the way to France to be able to get it. So I'm excited to review and start this season 2 off right. And just a little recap in case you haven't been keeping up with Prodigy or what's been going on. It's just been it's been a crap show, just to be blunt. It's been about 5 months since Netflix re-released the first season of Prodigy after Paramount Plus canceled it. And the second season is actually complete. It was completed at the beginning of 2024. And then now fans are very eager. We're frustrated, especially after what happened in France. So back in March, all 20 episodes of season 2 just dropped randomly. No fanfare, no marketing, nothing. It just randomly dropped. It was such a surprise when it dropped that the creators and showrunners of Prodigy thought it was a leak. They're like, this can't actually be legitimate. And then they had to go back and delete those tweets. And speaking of tweets, those same showrunners, Dan and Kevin Hagman, actually addressed fans this week on Twitter. So as we were compiling and writing this episode and getting our ducks in an order, they addressed the fans for Prodigy and said, hey, you guys are going to have to hold tight like everyone else, and the second season's going to be worth it. Well, I'm here to say at Omega Particle Podcast, the wait's over. We don't have to wait anymore. We're going to be reviewing the entire second season, like I said, before it's even released here in the United States, which is absolutely mind-blowing to me. And as the kids say, how did you do it? And I will say this. Don't ask me how I did it. I just did it. And it was hard. It was very hard. It was very difficult. But we have a great team here at the Omega Particle Podcast. So I'm excited to bring this to you. But if you're a loyal listener to the podcast, you will actually know that we're doing a Deep Space Nine review at the moment, as opposed to couple other episodes that come out. I want to say that we're going to change it up a little bit. Every Monday going forward on our Instagram stories, and there's about 75,000 of you on our Instagram, and we appreciate that, so thank you, but we're going to be putting it to a vote. So this week, will you rather have a Prodigy Season 2 review or a Deep Space Nine review? Just leave it to you guys, and we'll do that for 20 weeks, that's crazy to say, until we reach the end of Prodigy Season 2, then it'll go back full-time to Deep Space Nine. Without further ado, Luna, let's roll that beautiful bean footage and start Season 2 of Prodigy, Episode 1 review. Let's hit it. Now, before we get into the actual review, I thought it'd be a good idea to recap what happened in the Season 1 finale, because if you forgot, that's okay, because it's literally been 2 freaking years since it came out and since it ended. We're just going to do a little quick recap of what happened at the end of Season 1, just for everybody out there. First off, let's start off with the late, the great Holo Janeway and the Protostar. Holo Janeway offered and volunteered to go down with the Protostar, detonating that proto drive at warp in order to minimize the collateral damage caused by destroying the living construct. And of course, the crew protested, but Holo Janeway was like, hey, I'm going to put myself on this isolinear chip, and so you can just re-upload me one day, but she was too large. As a result, Holo Janeway gave her life to destroy the construct and save Starfleet. Her last act was to duplicate the parameters of the wormhole from Chakotay's original mission, so that the Protostar's detonation opened a space-time fluxure leading to an alternate future where Chakotay is trapped and allowing Starfleet to determine his coordinate and eventually try to rescue him. As for the Protostar peeps, Protostar crew throughout the whole entire first season was really trying to seek out the Federation and hope that they could escape their former lives and arrive at Starfleet Academy with open arms and just kind of a blank slate. And after arriving in San Francisco, that's not what happened. Dal, Gwen, and the others were instantly judged for stealing a Protostar. I mean, it was stealing a freaking starship. Obviously, there's going to be some offenses that they violated in there, and also they impersonated Starfleet officers. The cool thing is, and what I loved about season 1, is that Admiral Janeway, the actual Janeway, stepped in to vouch for the crew's integrity, and while the tribunal dropped all the charges, Starfleet didn't think that they should be fast-tracked to the Academy. Instead, Janeway took all 5 of them and said, hey, you can be warrant officers, my personal proteges, on the next mission to the Delta Quadrant. Which I really enjoyed that, because I was like, okay, that's fair and kind of lines up with the rest of Star Trek canon, is that the Academy is a very difficult, very prestigious, very hard thing to get into. And so now, if they just walked in after a month or 2 of pretending to be Starfleet officers, that they would just yeah, sure, come on in. No, I like that they made it, again, that high bar for the Academy. Janeway had to do those kind of extraordinary steps to help them out. And then with Gwen, instead of joining Admiral Janeway on her next mission, she decided to go back to her home world of Solemn. She could complete the Diviner's mission in her own particular way. Since Solemn hadn't been visited by the Federation yet, it still could be saved, and that Gwen was reasoning that Solemn civil war could be prevented by introducing values of unity and acceptance in preparation for that first contact that would eventually happen. So hopefully there'd be no reason to go to civil war. She's trying to avoid civil war, which is good. Then Gwen promised Dal that, hey, we're going to see each other again, don't you worry. And so there is some expectation that Gwen will show up in season 2 of Prodigy. And that also maybe this random mission in the Delta Quadrant might have something to do with Chakotay. Recap of season 1. Now let's get into the non-spoiler review portion of the episode. That's how we're going to break down this episode. There's going to be a non-spoiler section and a spoiler section. So we're not going to give out anything to anybody that they don't want to hear. And obviously, I understand some people probably don't want to hear and spoil all of season 2 before it even hits the States. I totally understand that. Hopefully there'll be something for everybody here. We'll have a non-spoiler review and then actual section of the episode with spoilers. For our non-spoiler review, as we all know from last season, the crew of the Protostar was not allowed to be in Starfleet Academy, and they would be those warrant officers. This episode did a really good job of refreshing us on the crew itself and what makes them unique, and ultimately we see how well they work together as a team again, even though they have a lot of differences. I don't know if the writers did that on purpose, because they knew it would be several years between season 1 and season 2, but it's not a bad idea to have that cool, good refresher. And for a lot of new Star Trek seasons, it's kind of almost a filler episode. It's just kind of like, okay, let's just get back into the routine. Now, some of them are direct cliffhangers from the end of the previous season, but this isn't the case here. However, this first episode checks a lot of the boxes one you would expect from a typical first episode of a new season, but unfortunately to me, it's done in a very predictable way. And don't get me wrong, it's not awful, it's just slow in some parts. And it's a 23-minute episode. So when I mean it's slow, it might be slow for 3 minutes. Don't take what I have to say super negatively. Let me just preference that. However, I will say after 20 episodes from season 1 and then that very complex climax at the end of the season finale, I have no issue with this kind of predictability and this reintroduction almost. I will say that it doesn't stay predictable for the whole episode. I really liked how they ended the episode, and it really made me excited for the rest of the season. And that it's almost one that I'm more excited for and intrigued by than any other Star Trek show out right now. And don't get me wrong, if you like Discovery, that's cool. I'm not hating on anyone's personal preference. I'm not like other podcasts or other Trek fans. Like, if you love Disco with a burning passion, great. That's not me. And I don't know if they're riding on the coattails of Voyager, and they kind of did that in season 1, where they made a lot of emotional connections with Janeway and the Voyager journey. And I don't know if they're getting into that in season 2 at all, but we'll have to see. I will give a little bit more detailed thoughts when we get into the spoiler section. To wrap up this non-spoiler review, if you're a big fan of the first season, and if you're a big fan of Voyager, you're going to love this episode. I don't know if it's because I finished a Voyager rewatch. I'm overly sentimental right now about the Voyager crew and that whole storyline. I just loved it. There were several moments that I was just like, my nerd heart grew 3 sizes. It was just fantastic. And then there's a couple cameos too, which I know there's been a couple sneak peeks that they've released. So I'm not going to say it, because if you haven't seen the sneak peeks, don't want to spoil anything, the non-spoiler part. But I was just, oh my God, so it was cool. And if you love the first season, love Voyager, you're going to love this first episode at least. And I'm not even going to release the name of the title of the episode yet either, because people are probably wondering, well, John, what's the title, brother? I'm not even going to release that, because I don't, any spoilers whatsoever. I'm trying to very limit it. Anyway, we're going to transition now to the spoiler section of the episode. So if you do not want to know specifics, then now's the time to bow out. Again, thank you so much for listening. But let's get into the spoiler section of the episode. We're putting the band back together. Reminds me of a Blues Brothers and Mighty Ducks kind of montage where you see the Protostar crew kind of everywhere. They're off doing their own individual things, and they get this notification and call on their pads to be like, we're putting the band back together, man. And it's still fun, and it's still predictable. You're like, okay, they got to get everyone back together again. They have to get all of them in the same location, and they're setting the table for the season. And that's what I meant when I said it's predictable. They have to set the table. They have to catch us up on what's been going on since we last saw them. And okay, that's cool. This is to run through that. And I'll say that the episode accomplishes everything that it needed to do. We have the Protostar crew on Voyager A with Admiral Janeway and the Doctor. I freaking had no idea Robert Picardo was going to be reprising his role as the Doctor. But I'm beyond thrilled he did. He picks up right where he left off, and even has like this quip Doctor line when somebody throws their like luggage at him. It's great. And seeing him with the mobile emitter, and then you hear this large crescendo of Voyager music when they approach the Voyager A in the shuttle. That's amazing. So I don't know. Again, maybe I'm just being super sentimental because I just finished a rewatch, but it just kind of reminded me of that moment in Picard season 3 when 7 of 9 was looking out at Voyager in the Space Dock Museum, and the music comes up and swells, and it's just good. It's just perfect. To go back to Prodigy here, I'll be honest, I was not really emotionally involved in Prodigy season 1. It took me more than half of the season to get into it. I'm sorry, it just did. I was not a big fan. I delayed watching it for several months. It just took a long time. I just wasn't feeling it, and it felt very remote and distant from other Trek shows that I've watched. And I'll say they really turned the ship at the end of season 1. Don't get me wrong, it's not in the same sense of a beloved Star Trek of the 90s or anything like that. But you can tell that the writers were doing something new, and they were trying to build that emotional bridge slowly. Now we see that kind of pay off in the beginning of season 2, which was very refreshing to see. I don't know if the writers are directly playing off our love of Voyager, but it seems that way. I'm curious to see if season 2 is going to go the path of almost a Voyager sequel. So now we have this new mission, and the mission is to rescue Chakotay. Not only are they going to try to rescue Chakotay, they're going to use a cloaked ship to do this. And only a select few people know about it because the gang of the Protostar crew eavesdrops on Janeway and her senior officers about, okay, this is the real mission. We're not going to observe this wormhole. We're actually going to go in and try to get Chakotay. And that's interesting. And we're going to talk about the whole thing and even some theories about, is this really Janeway? We'll have to see how the season progresses, because to me, it definitely feels like this is a Voyager mission. Okay, Chakotay's trapped in this time sphere thing, and we're going to go get him. We're going to take Voyager A and kind of get the band back together in a broader sense. And there's just going to be this group of kids and this quote-unquote school that's going to go along for the ride. Even there's rumors that Roxanne Dawson's coming back as B'Elanna Torres. So it's just, okay, they're putting the band back together, which freaking love. Don't get me wrong. That's great. There are some things in the episode that kind of makes me wonder, and the writers did a very good job. Janeway is this admiral level now. She is the height of a Starfleet career, everything you would ever want. And then now all of a sudden she's like, I'm going to go command my old ship name with a new predecessor. Like, I'm going to go command that. And now there's going to be 2 schools on that ship. Okay. And so the doctor's kind of there too. And he's maybe the main chaperone for the Protostar crew and maybe some comedic relief. But to me, it's like, why would she do that? That's super odd. And then now it's set up. It's like, okay, so it's actually reasonable because she's trying to do this secret mission with this illegal ship. I don't know about you, but for me, I was one of those people that I really wanted Chakotay and Janeway to hook up, to end up together. And we never got that. And the only thing we were left with was burnt pot roast. And so after all these years, we might get that. For just a reminder of where we are on the Star Trek timeline here in Prodigy Season 2, we are 5 years after Voyager came back from the Delta Quadrant. So this emotional tie between the crew would very heavily still be there. It's not like it's 30 years down the road, whatever. Oh, Chakotay's in trouble. Who's Chakotay? Oh, that guy was stuck in the Delta Quadrant. Cool. No, it's okay, it's 5 years has passed. We're probably still keeping in contact. Okay, I'm gonna go rescue him. The plot, very intriguing, very excited to see what happens. And in the age of spin-offs and prequels and sequels, it's a very tough thing to make it anticipated. It's a very tough thing to make it good. Maybe this will be like a rehash of what Star Wars did. I know this is a Star Trek podcast, but I feel like some of the best Star Wars shows have been the cartoons. There's been a good like live action, but man, it's the cartoons been knocking it out of the park. Will we see that continue in Star Trek? Where, we had Picard season 3. Oh my gosh, that was beautiful. But will now the cartoons pick up the mantle? Speaking of more things that play and diving into a little bit of theory play here, the backdrop a little bit about this cloak ship. The Treaty of Alderaan between the Federation and the Romulan Empire was signed in 2311, and it just reaffirmed the neutral zone and added a specific clause that the Federation is prohibited from developing and using cloaking technology on its ships, which I never understood because like the Romulans can do it and the Klingons can do it, but you're like, nah, you can't do it. So I was like, that's weird. So the idea of a cloaked ship, was it called the Infinity, Luna? That was my notes say. Okay. So this Infinity is cloaked. This is against every Starfleet policy, and it's very unlike the Catherine from Indiana that we all know and love. It makes me wonder, it could be 2 things. The first thing is this very emotional connection to a person that she grew very intimate with in the Delta Quadrant in Chakotay, and he's in trouble, so she's going to go rescue him. And it's like, look, that's my guy, I got to go get him. May not be romantic yet, fingers crossed, but that's my guy, I got to go get him. On the other hand, in the spectrum of Star Trek, and spoilers for Picard Season 3 if we haven't seen it, this is 19 years before Season 3 of Picard. could this be a changeling? I think it could potentially be a changeling, and that she's just kind of doing this to be reckless and mess up the Romulan Empire treaty. I'm not prescribed to that theory personally. I just want to throw something up against the wall and be like, yeah, it could be something wild. Who knows? I've not seen episode 2 or 3 yet of season 2, so we'll have to see. But there's always the right way, the wrong way, and then there's the Janeway. Moving on from Janeway, we're going to dive into a little bit of something called teenage angst. And I have to remind myself, look, this is, first off, it's a cartoon, but that doesn't matter, because you can set up great quality plot and writing on cartoons. But it's Nickelodeon, and there's going to be some teenage angst. There's going to be some talking to your crush and all this kind of like, oh gosh, stuff that's cringy, but it's really not that cringy. So there's a call between Gwen and Dal, and it has all these flaring teenage hormones, which, that's expected. I really was happy to see them back on the screen again, because I really thought they were the 2 strongest characters from season 1. The fact they aren't consistently together on screen is kind of a shame, but I definitely believe that their 2 storylines and plot lines will eventually merge at some point over season 2. I was happy that Gwen made a cameo in the first episode, because I was curious, I'm sure like you guys were, like, when was she going to come in? It's going to be like halfway through? It would be like a quick call or what? But it was anyone's guess. When we get a next one, I don't know. But for now, it was a couple funny moments of them 2 talking, and it's very, when you watch it, you'll be like, that is very teenage angst, yes. And it is a Nickelodeon show. It's meant for teenage kids. I'm not going to crap on that, because, it's like going to the Bed Bath & Beyond and then being upset they sell linens and cutlery. It's like, well, that's what you signed up for, brother. Like, you walk into that store, that's what they're gonna have. And so it's like, you have a Star Trek show on Nickelodeon, they're gonna have it. Like, you can't help it, they're just gonna have it. Overall rating for the show, and if you've never listened to a review episode for me, it's usually on a scale from 1 to 5. 1 is we have married salamanders because you went to warp 10, and then 5 is catching a pint down at Sullivan's in Fairhaven. So that's a spectrum. I'd say this episode is a 3.5, because 3.0, you set the table, get the band back together, you introduce this new crazy plot of cloaked ships and rescuing Chakotay, and it really sets up the rest of the season. Really good job. 3. Average. Right in the middle. Great. I'd give it the next 5, because at 3.5, because that end of reveal at the end of the episode really pushed it a little bit better than average to me. So that's why I end up at 3.5. As we conclude this week's reviews, please let me know what you think and what your thoughts are. I don't know if anybody else can watch this like I've figured out how to do and translate and all this crazy stuff, but if you do, I'd love to hear from you. I'm looking forward to continuing this with you guys and going on this journey, so let's just buckle up and see what happens. And that has been a review of Prodigy Season 2, Episode 1. And Luna, let's wrap it up. Thank you all so much for listening. Again, please remember to rate, review, and subscribe on the podcast. It means a lot to us. It's so awesome. And another reminder, on Mondays, we're going to be voting on DS9 Prodigy weekly episodes, see which one can win out and which I'll be reviewing. Be on the lookout for that on Instagram stories. And as always, please remember to check out a good friend of the podcast blog, www.jasontalksmovies.wordpress.com. He does non-spoiler reviews, spoiler reviews, everything from major seasons to major movies. Probably, again, the funniest guy I know, so please check him out. And keep your mental health strong. Kings and queens, it's very difficult out there today, so just want you to know every one of you is important and loved, and you would be missed if anything happened to you. So please keep it on strong, talk to somebody, and second star to the right, straight on till morning.